This is Introduction to Graphic Design, Episode 6, and we are talking about data and diagrams and infographics. I'm Alva Lynn Lundgren. So a very large part of graphic design, a very large industry within the field, is dealing with data visualization. And this part of the profession has grown over the years because obviously knowledge and information distribution have increased, and they are increasing exponentially, and things need to be explained quickly and succinctly. Otherwise, everything's going to look like this, and nobody's going to care about anything, and nobody's going to find anything remotely interesting. Although this table sorts and organizes information and categorizes things, there isn't really anything interesting to engage us in understanding the data, or even in understanding what exactly is being presented. So data needs our help as designers. So this is a diagram or a bit of infographic that talks about the different types of data out there. Data visualization's been around a long time. In the late 1700s and early 1800s, William Playfair started looking at how to present statistical information in a relevant and engaging way. And so he developed what we now call infographics. He developed charts and graphs and things like that as a direct response to the amount of knowledge that was building during his day. And he would use shape and color and line, and not just words. He would integrate it with words, but he made the information significant, and it helped people understand it, make decisions about it, remember it, and also share it. We have Playfair to thank for things like bar graphs, timelines, pie charts, line graphs. Here is an example of one of his graphs using bar charts. One of the people you should be aware of today is Edward Tufte. His purpose is to elevate the infographic so that it becomes beautiful and excellent and a piece of high design. He's known for well-crafted typography. He's known for fully integrating text with image. He's known for using spark lines. He's known for picture mapping, which is taking an image and basically slicing and dicing it structurally and compositionally into its basic geometric construct. And he's also a strong component of omitting anything that's not relevant, anything that's decorative, what he calls chart junk. And looking at this, which is his work, you can kind of tell that there is some influence from Playfair, but still he has elevated and simplified and makes use of space in a different way. But you can see how just the bare essentials are there, and typography and image work together, not side by side. This is a side-by-side concept where we have blocks of type surrounded or interspersed with images. So what is data visualization? Well, basically it's a representation, it's a visual representation, pictorial or graphic, of information. And so you can use illustration, you can use graphics, you can use icons, you can just use textual content. This design uses illustration. This design uses lines. So it would be considered more of a graphic presentation. We use graphics in data visualization to objectively present what's been observed. We use it to explain complex ideas. We use it to understand how things are connected. We use it to explain and illustrate systems, especially if systems are fairly complex. We use it to show patterns, trends, and relationships between things. Data visualization will take the physical form of a diagram, a chart, an infographic, or a graph of some sort. This chart basically shows the various responsibilities of an Amazon Web Service customer and Amazon Web Service as a host and platform. With data visualization, you use all the elements and principles of design. You have to bring all of those into play in the right way so that your design is effective, that it communicates properly, that it's legible, that it's readable, that it can be quickly understood. So you cannot neglect the basic formal elements of point, line, shape, color, and texture, and you can't neglect the relational principles of rhythm, balance, movement, direction, scale, things like that. So you really have to finesse things well when you're dealing with charts and diagrams to explain information. A diagram represents a process, a sequence, a structure, a situation. Diagrams come in the form of bar graphs such as this, and also histograms, which is a type of bar graph but not quite the same thing. A bar graph is going to compare information. A line graph is generally used to show growth over time or show change over time, given different criteria. A pie chart shows proportions. So you take the whole thing and you divide it into smaller portions. And this is a fairly simple pie chart. This is a layered pie chart. Venn diagrams are used to show the relationship or the common ground of various types of information. So a Venn diagram is always going to have at least two elements that overlap, two shapes that overlap. And then the focus of those diagrams become that overlapped area. A histogram is a type of bar chart, but instead of comparing data, it takes all the data and distributes it. Another bit of data visualization that you're probably familiar with if you work in Photoshop is the histogram. And histograms are not used just within Photoshop. They're used to communicate information. And a histogram is a type of bar chart. It's related, but it's not exactly a bar chart because it's not doing the same thing. A bar chart is going to compare the variations between criteria, whereas a histogram is going to show how that information is distributed. A bar chart will have separation or gaps between the various bars or a separation of color. A histogram will not. There is no, you can look at this, there's no separation between the various data points in this. And so this actually looks more like a landscape, as if you were taking a cross section of a mountain peak or something like that. There is no separation here. And what a histogram in Photoshop is going to show is either the value or the gamma distribution within an image, or the RGB, the color distribution, the frequency, the wavelength frequency in an image. So a histogram will just show how things are distributed, and a bar chart will compare the information. Subtle difference, but makes a world of difference if you have to select between one type of chart and another. Understanding all these different types of charts and graphs is helpful for you as a designer, because when you are given information to explain visually, you have to make a decision how that information is best explained. Is a line graph or a spark line going to be the best way to explain the data? Or is a pie chart going to be better? So as a graphic designer, you become responsible for the manner in which, or the vehicle in which, information is going to be presented. So let's talk about infographics. Infographics are more complex than your basic chart or diagram. They actually contain a variety of charts and diagrams, but they also can contain a lot more information. So an infographic is specifically pictures and text. So you've got illustrations, icons, bits of graphics, visual things that work with the text to explain the information. Infographics are used in news publications, they're used on websites, they're used in social media, they're used in PowerPoint or keynote presentations, in textbooks, advertising, they're used everywhere. So infographics are basically used to present information to inform people, or they're used to persuade, or both. So this is an infographic about infographics. and it's basically being used to inform. Every data visualization assignment brings together all of the design principles and elements, and you have to bring everything together effectively. When you're dealing with infographics as opposed to pie charts and bar charts, there are other things that really have to happen and you really have to be clear on, and one of them is hierarchy. The first thing that people have to understand in an infographic is what the infographic is all about. The reason for that is that infographics often stand alone. They don't accompany articles or white papers or pages of text. They're not used necessarily or always just to enhance information that's presented in a block of text. They are very often standalone pieces of design. And so they have to be all-inclusive in what they're presenting. So everything that needs to be presented needs to be included in the infographic, which is why some of them go on for, you just keep scrolling vertically, and they can be double and triple as long as this one is. So you have to have a clear hierarchy, and you have to basically have a strong title about what the infographic's about. That has to be front and center. And everything in the infographic has to support the title. So you have to have a clear hierarchy. There's got to be first read, second read, third read, all the way through the infographic, or else it's not going to work well. It's not going to be effective in its communication. You have to have good value contrast so that information stands out. The light-dark relationships of colors within your graphic is crucial to how easily that information will be read and understood. All of your typography has to be legible and readable. And legibility and readability are two different things. Legibility is typeface selection given the environment that the piece of design is going to reside in. Legibility also does relate to typographic identity for brands when that becomes a factor. So you have to choose type that is easy to read, but readability is also the ability to set the type so that the information is clear. So you want to be both legible and readable. So clearly here in this infographic, we start out with the first read, which is Pesticide Planet. Then we have some descriptive copy, and then we have various bar charts and Cartesian graphs and sparkline graphs and pie charts and things like that, and some isotypes and statistics and percentages and things like that. We have a section up here. We have a section, basically a scatter graph, which is another type of diagram showing distribution. Then we have a subhead and secondary information and caption. And then we have captions. So strong, clear, legible, readable hierarchy. There's nothing in this graphic that cannot be seen and read. There's good value contrast. The background is light in value. It's low value, allowing the darker color to come forward. All the information is darker than the background. Limiting your color palette will increase readability. Using all 12 hues, especially at full saturation, can be a quick way to present information, but it doesn't really make it palatable. Going more elegant with a limited palette will make the information more presentable. As we look in this, we see that everything is in the yellow and yellow-orange range with black and white. There is a real strong separation between light and dark. The background is light, black, and the chromatic colors come forward. We see the use of bar charts, and there's some scatter graphs, and there's some histograms, and there's all sorts of different things within this overall infographic. And there's another clue there about what infographics are as compared to charts and graphs. Infographics will include various types of charts and graphs. Infographics become more narrative. They tell more of a story. It's not just the presentation of information. It's relating all the information to each other in such a way that it's engaging and it makes sense to the reader. Digital infographics are much more engaging if there's interactivity. In other words, if the viewer can actually engage in some way with the infographics. So if this were mapped with various links, you could click on the dandelion and it would open up a pop-up with information on that plant. Or you could click over here on this image and it would open up with a pop-up about the honeycomb or the hive or something like that. So if you are working digitally to create infographics, interactivity is going to be a huge deal. A lot of augmented reality is data. It's visualized data. So in conclusion, to help people understand information, it needs to be engaging visually. It needs to be interesting visually. It needs to be clear visually. It needs to be represented accurately. People generally prefer looking at pictures over reading, especially when dealing with data and information that would otherwise be very dry and boring. So the role of the designer in creating charts and diagrams and infographics is vital for marketing, economics, for reporting, for informing and persuading.